Good morning. Today, I'm going to be discussing the topic of vegetarianism in moral ethics. Vegetarianism is essentially the practice of not eating meat like fish, chicken, beef, pork, or lamb, or any byproducts of animal slaughter. It can be practiced for a multiple number of reasons: for health, dietary restrictions, allergies, or for moral and religious purposes. The paper I am going to be discussing is William Stevens' Five Arguments for a Vegetarian Diet. Stevens, in his paper, is trying to challenge a serious, mature human being who's trying to be a morally good person if they would be unmoved by the case of vegetarian diet. He explains how these arguments would not be applicable for people who live in remote areas and the areas that are unsuitable for agriculture and need meat for sustenance. He has mainly targeted human beings for his vegetarian diet in North America and Europe, people who live in an agriculturally wealthy community and can indulge in different food diets. He states that utilitarianism and right based reasoning says that the raising of grain fed, factory farm animals, beef, pork, chicken, turkey, and lamb, and then slaughtering them is an immoral practice and should be boycotted. In Stevens' first argument, he details what meat consumption does to distributive justice. Distributive justice is essentially the idea that because of raising animals using the grains and legumes that could have been distributed to a group of people who are starving and unable to afford food, wealthy people are depriving them of their basic need for food. For many meat eaters who show refusal to share their food with starving human beings that could have been made available to them shows a disregard for the principle of distributive justice, and this, in effect, contaminates one's moral character. He states that developing countries mimic dietary habits of Americans, and hence Americans are setting a very dangerous precedent by wasting grains and eating a lot of meat. The indirect result of a vegetarian diet would be that demand for meat would decrease, which would contribute to lesser meat production and simultaneously free up grains and vegetables for people. The criticism for the moral character of meat eaters in this argument is that they are selfishly squandering the agricultural wealth to support their luxurious diets instead of having a vegetarian diet that could help aid people born or living in agriculturally disadvantaged regions. In his second argument, he discusses what meat eating can do to the environment and people who are sensitive to environmental issues. He uses different narrative papers by authors to explain the environmental impact of meat production and consumption. Stephen appeals that the cattle feedlots are a dangerous and large source of organic toxic waste that pollute the fresh water. The cattle livestock mixed manure mixed with nitrogen from artificial soil fertilizers produce harmful nitrates that pollute water and can cause nervous system impairments and other health issues. This argument appeals to the value of ecosystems as more worthy of preserving than the system of raising cattle. The environment is harmed, and one needs to accept that the environmental damage which the commercial meat industry contributes to is hazardous. His other argument discusses the moral consideration of animals and is most appealing to a philosophical audience. He includes utilitarian points like practice that inflict harm on sentient beings without good reason is morally wrong. Example, factory farming inflicts considerable suffering on cattle, pigs, sheep, turkeys, chicken, all of which are sentient beings. Human beings do not need to kill sentient beings for a healthy diet because their interest in meat consumption is trivial and luxurious. Therefore, the suffering of the animal outweighs the human need, because of which killing animals for human needs is immoral and unnecessary. In a deontological argument from Regan, he states that animals, experienced subjects like consciousness, beliefs, desires, a sense of future, feelings of pleasure and pain have an inherent value, hence should not be harmed. Raising of animals should be respected and is fundamentally unjust to kill them for human needs. Stevens, after making his arguments for a vegetarian diet, criticizes the same claims to show the reasoning behind them. He suggests that the lines of causation that stretch out between boycotting meat by Americans, the effect on the international business and political decisions to export such surplus of grains worldwide are complicated and difficult to establish or even predict. Action remains the expression of an individual's virtue, like Stephen explains that an individual not buying meat in a grocery store in Omaha is not suddenly going to convert into a bowl of porridge enough for 10 people in Rwanda. He compares facts from 1990 that an American has 112 kilos per capita consumption of meat, about 2 kgs per week, whereas in India 2 kgs per capita was consumed per year. His conclusions state that if we do not adopt a vegetarian diet to help feed the hungry, preserve the environment, resist sexist oppression, save sentient animal beings, and be kind to our colons, then we will lead up to give more and more to our environment out of guilt than we are doing harm. He includes some examples like working for UNICEF, burning down patriarchy, building organic gardens, and having eco-friendly source of fuels and electricity, building new egalitarian, gender-neutral, and non-exploitative community and society. He further suggests that given the various virtue of vegetarianism he has discussed, working towards a meatless diet is a worthy endeavor for an individual who has values such as compassion, humility, integrity, and moral values.